Okay, hi Emma, Kamran, Nazim, hope you're well. I am doing a recording of some of the design work I've been doing to try to resolve the issues that need resolving on the east boundary of the site, the Children's Eco Village. So I'm going to talk about water, particularly the waste that is carried by water. So this is surface water issues. I'm going to talk about the access road, which is the boundary road, the existing trackway on the outside of your boundary. Um, I'm going to talk about the distinction between vehicles and people walking, so vehicular and pedestrian issues. I'm going to talk about the way we actually treat the actual boundary line around the eastern part of this site in terms of what features it's going to need. I think it's going to need. Going to talk about the two control points and security. So that's the main entrance to the Children's Eco Village and the entrance to the school. I'll talk about the views from and of the mosque, the first impressions coming into the Eco Village, and also a little bit about whether we want the impression of the Eco Village when we approach it to be a sort of more urban edge, which then leads to this naturalistic rural inner part. Um, right, so if we start, so the problem is this. Um, we have these waterlogged access roads, which in drought conditions or dry weather is not particularly an issue. But in the rainy season, it becomes an issue, and where the weather is particularly intense in terms of the intensity of rain, as we've seen, it can become a significant issue that causes damage and requires us to keep remaking paths and edges and so on, and damages the access roads all the way up to the eco village. So obviously we're designing this for not only the most intense rain events that you're getting, but likely more intense rain events. So it might look like some of the things we're doing are a bit over the top, but come those more increasingly intense rain events, we'll need to have this stuff in place. Okay. So the area I'm looking at is this area. This is on the east of the site. This is the existing trackway around the edge. This is the trackway that we approach the eco village from, and you can see there's a certain length of it which goes out towards about, I think, the second house where the track has really started to fall apart. So that's where we're going to have to concentrate our efforts. So first of all, I'm going to look at the water. So currently water is coming off all the neighbouring houses in an uncontrolled fashion. There's very little storage of rainwater once it comes off their roofs, and this is only going to get worse. This then falls onto the ground and the ground becomes saturated and it finds its way down to the eco village. The first thing it hits is this road. So this road, as you know, is full of running water during the rainy season, and then about a month after, it still seems to be running down this road. So it's running down this road, um, and round about here, we start to get breakthroughs into the site, into your site, and that's streams of rainwater and all the any pollution that's carrying, plus plastic bottles and old sandals and bits and pieces of debris like that. It continues running down here, and I think there may be another sort of breakthrough somewhere around here onto the site. Um, and then it comes down to this gateway and swings round into the site there. And of course, it's also running down this steeper road from the village higher up, down straight through the gateway. I think there's a little bit trickling from this direction, but this doesn't seem to be currently not a major source of storm water. Okay. Now, we are going to need this access track to be in good condition, at least as far as the school here. So this site that we didn't originally imagine we would place the school is no longer suitable because of this rainwater issue. It's too low down. And even though when we surveyed it in whenever it was, 2018, It looks suitable. It's no longer suitable, so we can't put the school there. So me and Cameron had a look up here. As part of the site, I paced it out. I looked at the dimensions of good building space available, and currently I'm convinced that that is a suitable place to accommodate those school buildings, and we're assuming 3 blocks at the moment. So clearly, we have a shared interest in having this road not only in good condition, but suitable for vehicles and um, and dry, and generally dry, not a running stream. So we'd quickly look at the school. Now, the fence continues around this boundary line. Um, we imagine some sort of control point here, a gate, and maybe a sort of guard's hut, similar to elsewhere, to the main entrance. And then we have access between these blocks. Into the school buildings. These are sort of secure courtyards between each block. So I'm not going to go into the design of the school. Really, it's just to say that as you can see, I'm trying to take the water off the road, which is a fairly simple thing to do. The road does need to have a little bit of work in the sense that what I'm suggesting here is every 10 meters or so, the road needs to have a very slight undulation built into it. That allows water running down that road to meet the undulation and just to slide off at maybe 60 degrees, 45 to 60 degrees off the road, and to go across our boundary line and onto our site. That means that stops that path, that trackway becoming a stream. So what do we do along this boundary to accommodate that? Well, I think that you've obviously got your fence posts and your wire. I think we would need to create a mound and a ditch. So the mound would be directly off the edge of the road, and behind it would be a ditch. So every 10 meters or so, there would be an opening, and that opening would incorporate an upright metal grill set between 2 concrete posts. So we're only talking about something, you know, half a meter high at the most. That allows water to come off the road and pass through that grill. That grill then will capture some of the plastic items, plastic bottles, sandals, plastic bags, stuff like that. It'll reduce the amount of plastic being slushed onto the site. The water then goes through those gaps and into the ditch, and then runs and soaks away into our site. So you can imagine the ditch is along here. So if this is in full flood, then the water will be entering that ditch and flowing down this line here within a couple of meters of the boundary. Whilst it's flowing, it will also then, of course, be disappearing off into the soil, very similar to what we've created on the western boundary higher up. Okay. This also means that the grills will be visible to people walking and driving in that roadway. And it'll be easier to maintain it in terms of like having some arrangements, hopefully shared with the community, to pull off plastic and debris from those metal grills and deal with it to prevent those grills getting blocked up. But it will be obvious. And hopefully we can arrange some sort of shared communal responsibility for managing that. Okay, I think that's all I've probably got to say about that part of the site. Okay, so if we now come down here, you can see that this idea of these gaps in your boundary that allow water to slide off the road and be taken into the wetland area continues all the way down here. So this is where, in conjunction with the community, I guess, and the council, there is an opportunity to widen that trackway up to your boundary line. Currently, there is a track and then a sort of little strip of verge, I suppose, of grass or whatever, plants up to the fence. So I think given we're creating a raised bank on our side of that fence, the trackway could be widened right up to the boundary line, which makes that track slightly wider and makes it suitable for a vehicle. Now that track does need to be, it looks quite solid, but uh, there's going to have to be some investment in it, I think, over time. And that's in terms of building it up with a stone base, and then a sort of finer stone gravel topping, basically a proper track. Um, the fact that we're taking water off it at regular intervals should mean that it won't get washed away and it should stay in reasonable condition, um, with less repairs required. Okay. Right, now to the entrance area. Now, what shall I talk about first? We're going to talk about vehicular and pedestrian access. Okay. So, uh, what I've said about the trackway and building it up in stone and then a stone gravel would apply to this part of the track as well. But in this case, I think what we're going to need is a side gully on this side, with these undulations in the track that direct water from the track off to the side and into that gully. So I think it's likely that that gully, to prevent that eroding the edge, that gully is likely to have to be some sort of concrete culvert, um, because otherwise it will just run and undermine the track and the edge of this building plot area, these houses here. So this will be a touch more expensive to create that, although it's not a particularly long run. So that will tend to concentrate water, which then means it's running faster, and that'll be a slightly deeper gully, maybe half a metre wide. So at a couple of points, you probably find that the residents here might put a little bridge or something, just to step over it, like they do in Dar es Salaam. That will feed water off this track. Don't forget this track is stone, so some of it will be soaking into that stone and disappearing into the stone. But what comes off the surface will concentrate in this gully, and then that will. So in the worst conditions, there'll be quite a fast flow of water, as it is now, through that gateway there. Um, so there's no way really that we can avoid that water from here wants to get to here. With what I've suggested along this upper part here, this part of the track, all of this will reduce the amount of water coming down. There's a lot of water coming down here. So if we can keep taking it off every 10 meters, you're going to get much less of this stream pouring down here, which will reduce the amount going through the gate. But it's going to be more difficult down here to avoid that. So we have to accept we have a river crossing, a stream, a substantial stream crossing in the rainy period, uh, um, which is unavoidable. Now, I had originally thought we could have a pipe, an underground, not a pipe under the track here. However, observing how the water carries sand around here, the water that comes off the neighbouring area, it carries so much sand with it that it blocks stuff up very, very quickly. So a pipe under here would become blocked up with sand within probably the first rainy season, certainly the second. So I think it has to be open. I think it has to be open because that allows you to easily clear it if necessary. So I think what would be best happening here is that the track is built with an undulation again, like a traditional English Ford or a Ford, any Ford anywhere in the world, where from time to time there is water crossing the road and you will have to drive through it. But if you create a wide enough, shallow enough area, you'll be able to drive your car through that. And then when after the rainy season, there'll be a trickle of water continuing down here, and then into the dry season it will dry up, and you'll just find that a vehicle coming down here and heading off to school will just be driving on a shallow undulation, but no water. Whereas in the rainy season, you'd be having to drive through what I'd imagine would be maybe a foot of water at the most, perhaps slightly less. Anyway, so that's the idea there. I think that's the most practical. Um, this area of wall, this is the wall, the boundary wall, and this is your entrance gates, your current entrance gates. Now, obviously, there's a concrete strip along here, which is being very heavily undermined at the moment by the water, and also the foundations under here are being undermined. So this area here on the left hand where the gate, where the water is coming right past those foundations, that is going to need to be built up with concrete block and concrete to give it a good solid foundation that will stop the water undermining and scouring out the sand there. So it needs some work on that side, which is fairly basic stuff. Um, and as I said, this area under here needs to be built up with stone as a track with an undulation to allow that water past it. And that stonework needs to be continued probably out to about here. So the water is running on a fairly good thickness of compacted stone and gravel. And that will, as I said, get covered with sand, which will continue to wash through. But I think we should be able to avoid, extensive concrete works, which gets not only expensive but also high carbon uh, construction work. So fairly basic stuff, but the stone does need to continue here because you've got this fast flowing water which scours sand. Once we're out to here, it's just working itself into the natural sand subface there, and we can cope with that. Okay, basics once it's past the gate structure and the foundations. Now on this side, this is your main vehicular access into the children's eco village. You would turn left of the school and straight through the gate. Now the gates luckily are wide enough that half that opening width allows a car through. So splitting the entrance gate between allowing water and a dry access track is possible. This road, and in fact this pedestrian area here as well, can be built up right up to your concrete block wall here. So at the moment it's slightly below it, but I think we can and we should build this area up so that that is a level surface right across to your wall. This will help with allowing rain to fall on that and to soak through the stone and gravel here, and not undermine the foundation. So by building up the trackway with this stone, it'll add protection to the foundations all the way along here. It'll also look very smart, I think. So this area will look a little bit more urban, a bit more sort of formal, and tidier and neater. Okay. So let's talk about my thinking about control points. So vehicles at the moment arrive occasionally. In the future, possibly they might arrive daily. That's something I guess we probably have to anticipate. But at the moment, the guards would open those gates to allow vehicles through, but would only need to allow access through the pedestrian gate, the single gate at the moment, for most people turning up, and that includes visitors to the mosque. Now, my thinking is this. I think it's time we separated pedestrian access from vehicular access. And this brings into question, where do the cars go to park and how does that impact the mosque? Now, originally I'd suggested that the cars would swing round here and park up against the wall here. But cars need to swing round, they need to reverse, they take up quite a lot of space. And it really started to feel like these cars were compromising a very important space which relates to the mosque. And it certainly takes space away from people coming into the site and particularly going into the mosque area. And it strikes me that they're more important than cars. So my feeling at the moment is we should take the cars, the car parking, straight through that gate when they come and out to this area here where they can park over here against the mosque garden wall here. This can also be shielded with tree planting, vegetation and screens or whatever. Now, you might think that that's compromising the mosque, but I don't agree. I'll come back to that later. What that does free up is an opportunity to make much more of this pedestrian entrance. So would propose that you double the width of that entrance there, turn it into a double entrance, make it a little bit wide. It's quite narrow at the moment. You have to squeeze through a bit. Um, so it makes more of a ceremonial kind of entrance to approaching the mosque. And once you're in, you would treat the entrance area as a garden. So this is an entrance garden, uncompromised by vehicles. It allows space for events, little stalls, greeting, and could be a very beautiful entrance area, which gives a much better first impression than currently. I've suggested moving the guards hut from over here to over here. I don't see why it makes much difference where that guard's hut is, but it allows here a sort of a better view of the front of the mosque, the car parking areas, the entrance off into the eco village. It's also the right side of the stream. You don't have to step across that wet area here. Um, Other things that could happen along this wall here, it could have some signboards, information boards, the recycling bins, and so on. Could be along this face here. So the big thing is taking the cars out of the way and having this as a beautiful garden, which is a first impression of visitors arriving on foot, and there's an increasing number of people doing that. This then would tie in with perhaps a little avenue of trees or planting here, and then take people along the existing path into the mosque area. And then the garden is out here. So in terms of like other impacts on the mosque, well, how do we see the mosque? Well, you would see the mosque without cars in front of it for pretty much most of its frontage here. So I don't see that compromising it. The views from the garden out into the site would still remain attractive. I don't think a few cars parked along that boundary would really impact the views out to the site. You've certainly got, there's the pond to the mosque. You've got quite a lot of viewing from this part of the garden here directly out into the main part of the site. So to me, it feels like it's a nice arrangement. So I'm interested to know what you think. This is the new bridge we've put in. This is the what I call the causeway walkway. Um, we discussed on site, and there was general consensus that this would be a nice idea to plant an avenue of shade trees down the side of this walkway. This walkway edge here, the sand in rainy season, that sand is consolidated by um, the root structure of plants. So that's something that we've agreed needs to be got on with to consolidate plant growth and the root growth along that edge. And these plants will be planted into the Hessian sacks so that they have a year. The Hessian sacks will last about a year, or perhaps slightly less even, but they're a temporary measure to allow the root systems to get to grow into place, and then the roots naturally retain that sand along the edge there. We also agreed that all the sand that's carried down by the floods and that clog up these areas here can be literally dug up and thrown up onto here. So all of these can be dug out and thrown up into here to continue to build up this entrance pathway there. Okay, what else do I need to say? I think probably that's all I wanted to put across to you, and get your feedback on it. I've sent the drawing round, so you'll be able to look at that as a PDF, and you can zoom in on that to have a look at some of these features I've discussed. And if you like this method, as I work through trying to resolve these sorts of issues for different parts of the site, I can do these little videos for you to give you a chance to just look at it in your own time. And then when we meet, you'll hopefully be more understanding of the problems I'm trying to kind of design out here. So what I'm imagining will happen is you guys will look at this, you will have some sort of views on it. We could have a meeting, a shorter meeting between all of us to decide, are these solutions the right solutions for you? And then I'm assuming you would want me and Emma to liaise with the staff to get feedback on this and get their input before firming it up into a sort of, an actionable plan. Let me know if I've got that right.